So your job for today is to get a single motor rotating forwards and backwards. The work will be on your OneNote. This is the page. I'm not going to use this though because I want a bigger picture to look at. So I'm going to talk over this picture. So what you've got is you've got this motor driver. So it's the L298N H-bridge. It's actually two H-bridges, which is why you can drive two motors from it. And so what we've got over here on the right-hand side is a really simplified diagram of a H-bridge. So we have our positive voltage supply, we have our ground down the bottom, our motors in the middle, and we have these pairs of switches. This is one pair, IN1, and this other pair, IN2. And so we've gone through this in class, but what a H-bridge lets you do is change the direction of current through a motor. So if IN1 is closed or are closed, both of these switches work together, then the current flows from positive through this first switch IN1, through our motor this direction, through the second IN1 switch, and to ground. Right, so the current's flowing through the motor this direction. It's going to make the motor turn one way. If we want the motor to turn the other way, well then we open IN1 and we close the IN2 switches. And so now the current goes from positive through IN2 this way through the motor, which is the opposite direction to before. And so the motor's going to turn the opposite direction. So how do we do that, or how do you code that with your Arduino? Well, you've got three outputs coming from your Arduino to your H-bridge. And I've just noticed I've done these wrong. These should be plugged in just next to your next to those pins in your breadboard, but we'll cover that in class. So what have we got? Here we've got IN1, which is plugged into D4. We've got IN2, which is plugged into D5. And we've got this thing called ENA, which is plugged into D3. And those are written down over here. So what's plugged into where? ENA is plugged into pin 3. IN1 is plugged into 4. IN2 is plugged into 5. So IN1, we're controlling these switches. That's plugged into 4. IN2, we're controlling these switches. That's plugged into 5. And ENA turns on or off our positive voltage supply. Okay, so when we're thinking about how we're going to code this, the first thing you need to think about whenever you look at your circuit is, okay, what are my inputs and outputs? What am I working with? Because I need to declare those. And in this case, we've got 3, right? We've got ENA, so let's declare that. So I've given that a name. I'm just going to call it ENA, and I'm going to tell the Arduino where that's plugged in. Right, I've got 2 more outputs to put in, and I might just put some comments in. So all inputs, outputs, and variables so I'm going to give you an instruction. You'll have a copy of this code, so you will need to fill in some of the blanks. So, you know, I've only done 2 of the pins that we need. There is a third one. You are going to delete this and declare your last pin. All right, then we need to think, okay, so which of our pins are inputs and which of our pins are outputs, and we need to tell them what they are. So are we receiving an instruction or a signal, or are we sending an instruction or a signal? And if we go back to our little H-bridge here, we've got switches we need to control, and we've got a voltage supply we need to turn on and off. So that should tell you that those are outputs. So I'm going to declare, not declare, sorry. I'm going to set those variables, or those pins, or whatever you want to call them, as outputs. So right, and there are 2 more are missing. All right, and we're going to go down to our void loop. So your job, first up, is to make this motor turn forwards for 3 seconds, and then make the motor turn backwards. And I've told you with this diagram what I am going to say that forwards is. The reason for this is because we're going to mount the motors this direction on our robot. So this is going to be forwards, right? That's going to make our robot move forwards. So how do we do that? Okay, so we need to turn our pins on. And if we remember back to our diagram of a H-bridge here, we control the direction of the motor by closing one set of switches and leaving another set open. So in 1 closes one set of switches if we turn those on, and we leave in 2 open, which means our current is going to flow. Oh, and if we turn E and A on, that means our current's going to flow from positive through in 1 through to ground. Okay, so how we write that is we tell E and A that it's going to be high. We tell IN1 that's going to be high because that's going to close our switch. So it's going to close in 1, both of these. And we're going to tell in 2 that it's going to be low. Now, the thing that you might find when you fill in the gaps in this code and run this code is that this, right, might not make your motor turn in the direction you want. It might not turn what we're calling forwards. And the reasons for that might be that you have connected the 2 wires from your motor differently to the way in which I've connected mine. So if you've connected your wires, I'm going to say backwards, but there's really no such thing. They just might be connected the reverse of mine. Then your commands are going to turn your robot motor in the opposite direction, because it's sort of like flipping where this motor is connected in terms of where it's connected in to these points in the H-bridge. If that doesn't make a lot of sense, by all means, bring your motor and your gear up in class and ask me, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. But back to the code, and I don't know why the window keeps shrinking, which is kind of annoying. So that's the first part. We hope the motor spins forward. If the motor does not spin forward, well, then we need to swap which of our switches in our H-bridge are open and which are closed. And so you will need to come to this set of instructions, and you will need to change which switch is open and which switch is closed. And I might just put a little instruction here. In 1, and that open switch in 2, right? And then, you want them to do that for 3 seconds. So we put a delay in there, and our delays are in milliseconds. So every 1,000 milliseconds is a second. So 3,000 milliseconds is going to be 3 seconds. So that's our delay. We might put delay 3 seconds. So make the motor spin backwards. by below. Cool. So I will save this. I will make this available to you in class. And then your job is going to be make this motor spin forwards, make it spin backwards. Once you can demonstrate that you can do that, we can start bolting our robots together in class, and you'll start controlling 2 motors at a time. All right.